Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Council of Multiple Listing Services, or CMLS's implementing MLS waiver policy. We are very excited that you could join us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. We want to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar and it will be posted to the CMLS website in the next couple of days so that you can go back and review it, or if you want to share it with other people, pass it on. That is, we're happy to have you do that. So welcome everyone. My name is Danae Evans. I am the CEO of the Council of Multiple Listing Services. And also you'll see on here Bessie Hansen, who is our Director of Operations and oversees all programs with CMLS, is helping to moderate the panel today. I would like to take just a couple of seconds, and will probably take me a couple minutes, but to tell you a little bit about CMLS, just in case you are not familiar with us. CMLS is the National Trade Association for MLSs. We focus solely on supporting multiple listing service organizations to give them the tools and resources to tools they need to be the best organizations they can be. Really, we focus on bringing the real estate industry together so we can explore issues, provide solutions, and build a better marketplace. We have 203 MLS members, and those 203 members cover about 1.2 million subscribers. We also have 65 business partners that we bring together, so we work with all different stakeholders to help make a better marketplace. And then we also work with other organizations like REZO, the Real Estate Standards Organization, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and the Department of Energy, which is what brought us here together today. And we are working with individuals from the National Association of Realtors to help answer questions and bring information to this topic on 7.42 and 7.43 implementation. You can learn more about CMLS at councilofmls.org. We have lots of resources and publications there, so I'll go through just a couple of those with you. I think what CMLS is most known for is our conference. And that is going to be this year in Orlando, hosted by my Florida Regional MLS on September 26th through the 28th. We will be opening registration for that in 2 weeks, right after mid-year. And so we'd love to see you there. It is a conference focused solely on MLS-specific topics and issues, and we'll try to bring everyone together so that we can help manage the rapid changes that are affecting our industry and our members. Our focus is for 2018. We are working to review MLS policy, which is what this falls under and why we're very excited to be able to do this. Next is our broker relationships. So both at your local level and at the national level, how can we help you foster better relationships, conversations, and feedback loops to provide excellent service to your members and subscribers. And lastly, we are working to really identify MLS governance and the best practices specific to MLSs and how that can be different at times from association governance. What does an MLS organization need to be nimble and quick and stay ahead of, not even stay ahead of the curve, but really leading the industry and helping to make sure that the information that an agent or broker needs is in the MLS and easily accessible and able to be used so that the information and tools to be experts is just there and easily accessible to the users. I did mention we have resources on our website. We have our best practices that covers 8 different topics, from customer service, marketing and communications, legal. If you have any questions, you need any resources, it is just packed full of it. So I definitely encourage you to go to our website and look at those. And I'm really excited to share, we are rolling out in 2 weeks the first look at our automated online best practices assessment tool, so that you can go there and actually, before it was a paper checklist, so if you wanted to find out where you were on customer service, it was a printout paper sheet that gave you information, but we're actually taking it, it's an online tool with links and resources right in there that you can go quickly to a resource where you might want some more information or some more support. And last, just to review, is our CMLS program. That is a premier professional designation for MLS leaders, volunteers, and business partners. We do have training for both MLS volunteer leadership, that they can take the certification, to our Leadership Academy, which is a C-level course about leading MLS organizations into the future. And I would just like to really push that any of those classes, I constantly get emails back from people who are taking that say, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, but it was so great to take this course because it either reminded me about things that I wasn't doing or needed to do, or even just brought something up that I hadn't even thought about. So I would encourage, if you haven't started your CMLS certification, to please do that. And then next slide, Betsy, I will go over what's one of the really exciting things we've done recently at CMLS is our new marketing campaign for Making the Market Work. It is really helping to clearly articulate making the value of MLS and what it means to your marketplace, your members, subscribers, and even the consumer. So your MLS is not just about data, it's not just about technology, but it really is at the most basic and valuable level. It's about creating and maintaining and safeguarding an orderly real estate marketplace in which members can thrive. So you'll see an example here. We did lots of resources that our members can utilize to, you'd put your MLS name in there and they can be customized that our members have available to this. So one of my other favorites, it's not, actually that one's not my favorite. My other one is talks about competitors and gladiators working together to help make homeownership happen. And that's the power of MLS. So it's some really amazing stuff. And if you're a CMLS member, I would definitely recommend starting to utilize those. We've had great feedback from our members. If you're not a member and you'd like to know a little bit more about it, please email us at info@councilofmls.org, and we would be happy to talk to you about those benefits and what we're doing. So next slide, if we can hand it over, I would like to introduce Betsy Hansen. She is, like I said, over all of the programs at CMLS, and she's been with us for about 2 years, but prior to that, she was at an MLS. And so, Betsy, if you want to go ahead, take it and introduce our panelists, and let's start talking about MLS Policy 7.42 and .43. Betsy?
Hi. Thank you. I was on mute. Thank you, Danae, and thank you all for attending today. Just to let you know, we'll be taking questions that we'll have the panelists answer after we've gone through our slides. If you'll please use the question box in GoToWebinar to submit your questions, and then we'll have Laura from CMLS and Caitlin from NAR who will be reviewing and grouping any of those questions together and directing those to the panelists. Then we'd like to thank our panelists for attending today. First, we have Shad Bogany, who's the chair of the NAR Multiple Listing Issues and Policies Committee. We have Matt Consalvo, who's the CEO for Arizona Regional MLS. We have Sam DeBoer, the vice chair of the NAR Multiple Listing Issues and Policies Committee, and Nicole Jensen, VP of Business Technology for Mybor Realtor Association. So let's get to it. Shad, would you give us some background on why the policy changes were made?
Yes, Betsy. The policy changes responded to a lot of brokers' concerns over the need for more of a modern MLS service structure. The policy changes was considered. We vetted them over 14 months, included input from the brokerage community, the MLS leadership, and staff. The new policy requires that MLSs to provide a no-cost waiver of MLS subscription fees to qualify for a waiver license must subscribe to at least one MLS where their principal broker is the participant, which does not have to be associated with an owned MLS. This policy goes in effect, guys, July 1st, 2018, and it includes mandatory amendments to the local MLS rules. Licensees are only authorized to receive and use MLS data and services where they subscribe. Many MLSs have a method in place to prevent unauthorized access to MLS data. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and Sam's going to give you how it really works in real world, give you some broker examples, and how this will affect brokers agents. Sam?
Hi, thank you, Shad. And thank you for everybody who's on the call today, particularly CMLS, who's done a lot of work with us on this policy and research on the white paper on the policy and making sure all of our constituents had a voice in this process. So, yeah, as Shad went over, really the philosophy here is to create more flexibility for brokers and agents in being able to join and use more MLS services. And we were very cognizant throughout the process of not wanting to create a situation where we had potential for more free riders of agents using MLS services that weren't paid for. Excuse me. The majority of our folks were MLS execs and administrators. We had probably nearly half of the folks working on this were brokers and broker representatives, as well as NAR staff. So we wanted to emphasize that we want more flexibility and more ability for brokers and agents to use more MLS services. And that was really the philosophy overall. So we got these requests from brokers, some of them with new business models, a lot of them using more technology. They've got a more mobile agent population, and growing brokerages who are covering larger territories, moving into new areas. And as they were doing that, they were facing prohibitive costs of joining these new MLSs based on their business models. So for a simple example, companies with 400 real estate agents, and these folks have maybe 20 of those agents who want to join a second MLS. Their 400 agents are already in one MLS. They've got another 10 agents who want to join a third MLS. And while that would actually bring more subscribers to more MLSs, the brokers just can't do it because they'd be charged 400 subscriber dues in all three of these MLS organizations based on the past billing rules and the way they were set up. So you're going to hear about different ways that you can implement this locally. There's flexible options depending on what works best for your local market and your MLS. The key change to focus on is essentially a billing question. All the other implementation choices you have sort of flow down from here. And that's simply that brokers have to join an MLS first before their agents, just like they always have. Brokers can join many MLSs, but all of their agents don't necessarily have to use or pay for each MLS. If an agent is subscribed to one single MLS, no other MLS can bill that agent subscriber unless that agent wants to use and pay for that MLS. So we've got some great examples of folks who have been using this policy for many years in the past, from Kansas City to the Carolinas, Texas, California, and then some other options that may work better for you in your local market. But if we really just come back to that simple philosophy of the policy, which is that waiver in place where the MLS doesn't charge agents for services that they don't opt in to use if they already subscribe to another MLS, then all of these other implementation options really make sense. So from that, I'd be happy to turn it over to our MLS folks with some of those options for implementation.
Great, thanks, Sam. Nicole, if you would just give us a little bit about kind of from the MLS executive perspective, what are some opportunities for MLS execs when implementing the policy changes?
Sure. Thank you, Betsy. I guess I come from a perspective of having worked for like the gamut from a small to medium MLS, I guess I would call it, to that one of them had virtually no overlapping market disorder. Another had essentially 100% of overlapping market disorder. So it sort of ran both ways. And now I'm with I guess, larger board with 8,000 members, the larger MLS. In all three market areas, we had the same policy, which was you had to belong to some MLS, like an MLS, but not necessarily our own. And you would only be able to obviously use ours if you were a subscriber. So there are challenges and opportunities regardless of the size. So ultimately, like in my view, this policy is just a really great opportunity for all MLSs, no matter your size, to explore how we can better serve our members. Some of the MLSs that I'm familiar with, just from being from Nebraska, a couple years back, they might need to do so on like a really super local basis. If this is what their brokers want, if they can provide best in class service, like meeting the broker's needs, then we should applaud them. And that is absolutely amazing. And honestly, some of the smartest, most progressive MLS execs I know in my 20 plus years are in those markets with under 1,000 members. And so this is not about size. It's regardless of size, we just all need to embrace it and use it to really grow our value. If smaller MLSs are doing amazing things and offering services and products that their members require, then this actually might be good for them, because maybe they'll grow due to this policy change, because some members now can join that MLS, whereas before they were required to join another. So I think both sides, it can be looked at as an amazing opportunity. And like Danae talked about before, we all need to look at our organizations and see how best practices, and that tool can help us improve, because being from all different sizes, even at the size that I'm at now, I see so many areas where I can better serve my brokers and my members and therefore my marketplace. So the beauty of this policy, though, is like what Sam said, is the ability for each MLS to adopt the option that best serves their members. So while it is, the word mandatory is used for it, there are options. And Matt Consalvo is going to go over a few of the available waiver and billing options with us. Matt?
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you everyone on the call, both participating and listening in. I want to remind everyone that everyone is a participant in this process, that you have the ability to pose questions in that question box, and we welcome the opportunity to address those. So as we look at the waiver and billing options, they're up on your screen now. There's really 4 of them, and I'm going to go over them fairly briefly, but completely. And the first one is what has been framed as a good faith, no paperwork. The second one is the broker-friendly single waiver form, the 1 waiver form per licensee, and the waiver plus verification. I'll talk about each of those, but I want to remind everyone that it is not mandatory to monitor or to administer the waivers, but it is mandatory to make the availability of the waiver out there. This is a mandatory rule that we have to make this process available. But if you previously have not implemented this optional policy and you previously have not audited your membership, really not much has to change for you. So going back to the slide on the screen, the first one is a good faith, no paperwork. That is basically saying that we only charge for licensees who affirmatively choose to subscribe to our MLS. And as Sam pointed out, the broker participant role is unchanged in this process. There must be a broker participant, but we as an MLS, if we choose this good faith, no paperwork option, we're taking those licensees underneath those participants and joining in that process, and we're taking care of them. The second one is a broker-friendly single waiver. This is a single waiver form that a broker participant can fill out for all the licensees under their umbrella that is not going to participate in the MLS. This would be an MLS that requires a waiver form to be submitted, that the broker executes that form on behalf of his or her licensees that are waiving MLS service from that particular MLS, and that broker participant submits that in. Where I come from, that is the methodology we're using at this point. We're not actively auditing our membership, but we are making that broker-friendly single waiver form available so we can make sure we keep track of the licensees and the participants in the service and how those licensees flow underneath that umbrella. Another methodology that some MLSs will take is a 1 waiver form per licensee, which will require each licensee who is waiving service secure a waiver form for them and secure a signature on that form. And in many examples that I've seen, they also require the signature of the broker participant. This will require multiple pieces of paper for any brokerage, especially a large brokerages that has multiple members that will be waiving service. And the last option is the waiver plus verification. This is a situation where whether you choose the option 2 single waiver or the option 3 1 waiver per licensee, that you're receiving these and the MLS is taking an active role of auditing and enforcement of those waivers. For some MLSs, that could be on an annualized basis or semi-annually. Some have spoken of doing it on a monthly basis. It all depends on what's best for your local marketplace and how you wish to administer this policy change. But those are the four widely spoken about and discussed in the FAQs and the other materials around on how waivers could be administered.
Great.
As we look, do we have any questions that we need to address as a panel at this time?
Matt, could you talk a little bit? I think that you at Arizona have had some experience with trying out some different options prior to this implementation.
Certainly. We went to an audited policy, an audited waiver policy many, many years ago, in excess of 3, possibly as deep as 5 years ago. And we spent a significant amount of staff time auditing, at the time, about 36,000 subscribers and about 3,000, 2,000 waivers. And we worked with our brokerage, with our 5 shareholder associations. And in that process, we found a lot of legitimate reasons why those 3,000 folks were not subscribing to our service. Everything from referral-only agents to agents of health issues to agents who were working in a commercial firm that also dabbled in residential to agents who were not necessarily in our central Arizona market, but their office was, and they had satellite offices in other areas of Arizona. So as we evaluated how much effort and staff time and contribution we made to cleaning and auditing this process, we just determined for us it didn't make sense to continue that. There are some broker participants who want to keep a very clear accurate of all the licensees and who's participating within ARMLS and not. So we left the waiver form available for them, and we still track them in our membership system, but we're not actively auditing them. We reserve the right by policy to go back to auditing if we ever choose to, and if we have an office who we feel has some concerns, we may choose to look at that upon recommendation. We always go back to the definition of how you audit those, and there's 2 methodologies. One is a combed audit where you're looking at it on a cyclical basis, be it annually, semi-annually, or monthly, or the other is where you're auditing at a notice of possible concern. Last time we audited an office, it's been more than 8 months. And even with all these policy changes and the discussion of changes to 7.42 and 7.43, I do not see that our systems or methodologies will change at all. And we will continue with that broker-friendly single waiver form, but we really operate more off the good faith, no paperwork model.
Great, thank you. We had a couple of questions. If you could repeat the waiver plus verification option.
Certainly, option 4 on that list that was up is a waiver plus verification. That is where they require a waiver, and it could be the broker-friendly single waiver or the 1 waiver form per licensee. It could be either of those 2 documents, but it's a verification process. It's where you're going through and auditing all waived licensees. This methodology gives you the greatest amount of information and intelligence on the process, but it also creates an administrative process within the MLS that you have to continue with. For us, what that meant was we went to the Arizona Department of Real Estate. We downloaded all the licensees within the central Arizona region. We compared all those licensees, which means we had to add license numbers to our data structure because it didn't exist at that moment. It does now. And we compared on a annualized or semi-annualized basis all those licensees to whose brokerage they're under, whose broker umbrella, participant umbrella they're under, notify those broker participants of anyone that was out of compliance, tracked all the folks moving from office to office and readjusted those, requiring a new waiver from the new broker participant, sharing that information with our 5 shareholder associations, and anyone who remained out of compliance, which we always had a handful each year, those broker participants were subject to some form of disciplinary action under our rules and policies. And that always became an awkward discussion. But that is the waiver plus verification process, where you're not only receiving that waiver, but you're actively doing something with that knowledge and actively auditing the process to affirm compliance.
Great, thank you. Laura, do we have some questions from the group?
Yes, so thank you everyone for sending your questions in. Matt and Nicole, there are quite a few. Matt, you've kind of addressed the verification process, but there's different flavors of that question coming in, so I think we should spend a little bit more time on it. Audit, do you have to have a written policy? So I know, let me put those out and give Matt and Nicole a minute to think on it. And what we'll do is continue to monitor these themes, and we are taking notes. And so if we need to get some follow-up, I think Rodney and Caitlin from NAR are kind of tracking the big themes that are coming in. But again, if you can both comment on that, and then maybe Betsy or the rest of the panel, if anyone has anything to add, but just generally how you get to a best process, a best practice here, and in particular, what triggers an audit. Those are some of the themes that are coming through.
I'll go first. This is Nicole. You know, I've seen it done all different ways. Back in, you know, a couple of years back in a market that was about 900 members, we would do the same thing that Matt said and look at the real estate commission licensing entity to see with whom each license was affiliated. But even that didn't really bring us clarity because some brokerages offer, owned, you know, offices in both, in two different marketplaces. And so then we would go to their websites and kind of try to figure, and as long as they were a member of an MLS, then we were good and we kind of check marked them off. And so that's one way of looking at it. And I think that's kind of this is what the policy is now saying, that if you're going to audit, if you choose to continue to monitor and audit the license affiliations of your MLS subscribers, then this policy is, you must mandatorily adopt it, and that you have all of these different options on the way that it may work best for your local association, which is, or MLS, pardon, which is going to be based on a lot of different variables like staff size, the amount of time you want to put into it. I mean, Matt has thousands and thousands of members, so is it worth his time to go in and look at this every single, however often, 6 months, every year, whenever? And really, after you do an audit, it's old the next day. You know, somebody could move their license back and you wouldn't know it until you audit again. And so I think that's what we're trying to talk about when we talk about it being, it's kind of like this oxymoron. And I was even confused, quite honestly, for quite a while when it kept being said that it was mandatory and it had an M behind it, and that's the way it was put forward, and it indeed is. But then the word optional keeps being brought up, and so I was literally confused, just to admit my own ignorance. And so it's taken me a while to grasp onto, like, how do you need to implement it? Well, that's the key here, is that you have options, and you need to assess what works best for your organization and your resources and your brokerage and your brokerage constituents and your needs. Like, do you have a problem? If you don't have a problem, then maybe the good faith, no paperwork option works if you're a staff of one. I mean, you know, there are so many different models. We are also very individually unique in the way we do business, the resources we have, the everything, that you really need to sit down with your volunteer leadership or the powers, whoever, and discuss the best path forward for your particular MLS setting. Does that sort of help?
I agree with you completely, Nicole. This is Matt again. Going back to the root question, I encourage all MLSs to have a written policy on this. I encourage them to have a membership policy regarding waivers. And I know NAR has put together a host of resources of sample waivers, and I suspect sample policies, but you can always reach out to ARMLS, and we would help you with that too, with what we've given you, what we have. I also think that the question also centered around this audit. And I noted in my discussion what the practice we've used for a very long time is audits can be done in two methodologies. One is on some cycle, be that monthly, semi-annually, or annually. just pick your cycle, put it in your policy, and adhere to it. And Nicole makes the fantastically correct point that no matter how you conduct that cyclical audit, the day after it's conducted, it is out of date, because it always can be out of sync because reality changes. A second way that we put it in policy was to audit as we are notified. And what that means is if we have somebody who bumps into an office that may not have all the licensees waived or all the licensees participating, or bumps into an office that they suspect somebody who does not have MLS access is utilizing the MLS system, they share it with us, and we work with the broker participant to audit that particular office, make sure everyone within that office understands that the MLS is a participatory environment that they need to, if they're going to utilize the services, they must subscribe and pay for those. And we work with that broker participant to make sure that their office is in compliance. But as I said, it's been many, many months, probably about 8 since we've had anything to look at in that endeavor.
Great, that's helpful, and certainly a lot of questions about that coming in. Another kind of related question is someone is sort of spinning it the other way. So what are some red flags? What should MLSs be looking for if they take that option and institute a waiver? So what constitutes a violation? And then the point here is, so I'll kind of quote it, participants argue the listing belongs to them so they can do what they want. So, what are some thoughts from the panel on those points, particularly around red flags and watching for those violations?
Who would like to go? Sam, do you want to take one, or do you want Matt and I to continue?
I can step in. I think from my end, depending on where you're at, but typically in most markets, the listing belongs to the broker. But if you're in a different marketplace where you have control, but I would say the majority of our MLSs, that listing, it belongs to the broker itself. So it would still be under that broker. So wherever the broker wanted to put it, that's where it would go. Sam, would you like to add in? Because I know you're in a different market.
Sure. I think that, we're trying to keep this part of the policy as straightforward as possible. So, it doesn't change anything about the broker owning the listing, about the broker participant having to be a participant before an agent subscriber. And it just, allows more flexibility over and above that. So I'm not sure if I'm getting the specificity of the question. Maybe you could go over that again.
Well, this is Matt. I'm going to jump in there too. Yes, the listing does belong to the participant. I think the vast majority of all markets believe that to be true and operate off that mentality, if not all of them. And I believe that folks who choose not to participate will very quickly understand the inconvenience of not being a member of the MLS. An example would be many MLSs control key and key box access systems. To put a listing in the system and to be identified as the listing agent, you must be a subscriber of that MLS. So if we see all the listings underneath a broker participant, but in the private remarks, they're referring questions and comments to a licensee that is on a waiver or not on a waiver, depending on the situation, it's a good time for us to have a conversation with that participant, because as a waived subscriber, as a waived licensee, they do not have rights to participate in the MLS. So we really can't have them being in control of that listing environment, or certainly they don't have access to a key at that point. They don't have access to utilize the MLS for market research, comparative analysis, etc. We have found with 40,000 subscribers that it's very quickly evident the value of the MLS. And we have folks coming forward saying, yeah, I need to join. I was on a waiver, but I need to join because I want to participate in these things. I want to be in the organized marketplace called MLS.
I agree as well. Go ahead.
No, and that's exactly right. And following on with that, it's we've spoken quite a bit about this and looking at the policy. That agent, if that agent is named in the remarks, to be contacted for the listing, that agent is using MLS services. That is someone who should be subscribing. So certainly, if that agent is identified for phone calls, et cetera, and for showings, that's a subscriber who's using MLS services, and there should be a charge for that. On the other side, the designated broker getting phone calls on all of the listings from that office, even if they were other agents' listings, is something that's just not going to be palatable to the brokers. The brokers don't want those phone calls. So while that situation is a potential in some cases, the vast majority of brokers and agents don't want anything to do with that situation. They want the correct licensees and subscribers to be MLS subscribers and to use those services and not try to funnel them through the broker.
Great. Okay, so a related question. So going to option 1, the good faith, no paperwork option. And Rodney, I'm going to have you start, if you could, this is policy related, but could you fine for use violation if you're choosing that option 1, the good faith?
Thanks, Laura. And thanks so much to all of our panelists and CMLS for hosting the webinar. I think this is great and a good start to our discussion. We've gotten lots of questions about implementation, about the ramifications of the policy, and there's a definite concern out there about unauthorized access to information, regardless of which option you're going to pick. So if you adopt option 1 and you don't have the waiver, is there still repercussions against the broker or someone if an individual who's not paying for the MLS as a subscriber gets access to that information? And the clear answer to that is yes. If I'm a broker of a multiple listing service and one of my licensees is getting access to that service, that broker can be responsible and sanctioned for providing access to that service. If you've adopted one of the other options where you have a waiver form, the waiver form might identify what the repercussions are for somebody who's opted to get a waiver and is getting access to the information. And that can include sanctions against the individual receiving the waiver and or sanctions against the broker who is part of that waiver as well. I don't think there's any anticipation that somehow the MLS wouldn't have an ability to penalize somebody who is not paying for the information and yet somehow trying to get access to it.
Great. We have a lot of questions coming in, which is the whole purpose of getting together today. Let me get caught up here. So Sam, let me throw this to you. There's quite, let's see. If the broker has the listing, is the listing agent, but is not servicing the listing, how can that be addressed?
Well, again, I think, Matt spoke to this to an extent. We want, if it's actually a listing agent who is using the services of the MLS in some way, then, that listing agent should be identified in the listing and should be paying subscriber dues. On the other side, if a broker is funneling listings through, we've spoken with execs at a number of MLSs. I can remember Bright in particular, who had to go out and have a conversation with those brokers and talk about what is appropriate when we can see that a single broker has 100 listings, which we know are actually other agents' listings. So I think that's a situation where, and again, I think our MLS execs could probably speak better to this than me, but where the MLS should have a conversation with that broker about what the actual role of the broker, participant, and the subscriber are, and potentially get into penalty measures if necessary so that those roles are properly being used by those brokers and those agents. But I think, again, Matt or Nicole have probably dealt with the situation.
I'll just say that, yeah, I mean, I'll chime in with a little bit of realism that I've never met a listing agent that didn't want to be on their listing. So that kind of That's part of it, I guess. And I don't know that I've met a broker that wants to field all of their listing agents' calls. And so, like Sam said, they're in this. You know, if they're listing properties, then they're going to join an MLS, dependent upon which one works best for them, right? But I've just never struggled with it. I understand that every market's different, and I haven't experienced all of them, but we do have value. There's more than just the value of having your name displayed on a listing, and all the tools that go along that offer, actual services to our agents and to our brokerages, and in the form of third-party vendor solutions, lockbox access, CMAs, tax data. The list goes on. And so, it proves difficult to operate in a marketplace without being attached with, participating in some MLS. I don't, I think there's enough value there, and that's part of our jobs. Again, going back to what I talked about earlier, is trying to make us invaluable to our members, so that they want to join us, that they're not trying to figure out a way to work around it, but rather they can't see their life or their business without us. So.
This is Matt. I'll jump in there again. I believe also I would encourage MLSs to look at how they want to enforce their waiver process. For many organizations I've spoken to, they want it to be an educational opportunity, but you have to have written policy and some type of disciplinary function in that written policy. But I think the hope of many MLSs is they never have to get there. So when you have a conversation with that listing broker that has 100 listings in their system, or under their name in the system, and you chat with them about what it means to utilize MLS functionality, to utilize all those tools Nicole pointed out that the MLS offers beyond just this concept of a listing, I found it very easy for brokers and subscribers to come along that bandwagon. There have been a couple opportunities where they haven't wanted to come along. They've wanted to be argumentative. And that's where you fall back upon the written policy and the disciplinary process of that policy. But I've not met an MLS that wants to go down a disciplinary path with their agents and subscribers and brokers. But we have to have it in place. And I think the value of the MLS is this concept of all these tools in this organized marketplace. And I encourage MLSs to find ways to cooperate to the benefit of their broker participants and subscribers. How do we cross bridges? How do we cross mountains? How do we cross county lines to make the experience as great as they can for our users? Because the consumer doesn't understand why a line was drawn on this particular map or why this overlaps to this section. And I believe the changes to policy 7.42 and 7.43 makes the MLSs more adaptable to working together and to working hand in hand with each other. So where you have an overlapping market disorder, call your neighbor and try to figure out how you best meet the needs within this membership policy structure that rewards those folks participating, curating, and caring for the data, and doesn't allow it to leak to those who don't. But in my experiences, brokers and subscribers are very open to that conversation.
Okay, we have quite a few now coming in, just really getting a hang of if the primary subscriber, the broker, belongs one place, and then listing agents are affiliated with another MLS. So Sam, let me start with you with this question, and then there's a couple we'll have but there's several. I'm going to pick just one. If a broker belongs to several MLSs, place a listing into an MLS, even if the listing agent belongs to it. Why don't you start us?
Hey, Laura, you're breaking up, but I think I can read which one you're reading. Was it, if a broker belongs to several MLSs, can the broker place a listing into an MLS even if the listing agent may belong to another one?
That is the one. I don't know if that's any better.
Yep.
And Sam, if you could get us kicked off with that. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Sure. So I think we're going with what the technical rules are, and then obviously you've got your local policies that will affect this slightly. But in effect, and we've had long discussions with this at our policy committee meetings. The broker does own the listing, and if your local MLS allows that, the broker could put in the listing because they do own it. But again, as we've just spoken about, brokers don't want to get the calls on the listings. Listing agents don't want to have their information obscured. They want credit for their listings. They want to be, advertised as a listing agent. So while we do know there will be situations where we have these outliers of folks who bend the rules and need to have that conversation with the MLS, there's so much greater benefit to the policy that's being created here that these are the other, slightly unhappy consequences that may come up where we're going to have those folks who try to skirt around these rules by having a broker put that listing in. So, it's based on your service area, however you set it up locally. I shouldn't even go down that rabbit hole right now, but right now the policy is that brokers can put their listings into the MLSs they participate in. That would probably be a poor way of doing business for the listing agent and for the listing broker. And if in any way that listing agent is accessing the MLS or using the services of the MLS, then the MLS should be able to charge that subscriber, because that's what they are, as a subscriber, if that listing agent is using that MLS. In our case, in every broker I know, we would not ever want to do that. We would require our agents to be subscribers to that MLS, to put their listings in the MLS. The listing agents want to get that credit, and the brokers don't want to be the one taking those phone calls. But that's the current situation as best I understand it.
Can I make I got a question that was sent to me on an email, and from someone who's on the webinar. And it goes on to say that the idea of having to pay to use an MLS if you use it, why else would someone be a member of the MLS if they aren't using it? I'm new to the committee, so I'm missing some critical information. And let me say this, we assume that everybody in this business is full-time, and this is all that they do. You have people that are members of MLSs that do one deal a year, one deal every other year, or just occasionally want to be able to use the MLS if they're an appraiser, being able to use that information when they get a call from a family or a member or someone who's asking them for advice. They assume that because they have a license, they can get this information for this particular person. So there are many times that people are members of MLS just to have that data and have the availability to get that data. And I hope that answered that question, because realistically, the majority of our members are not, at least in my area, the majority of the members are not full-time agents. And you've got a lot of part-time agents who occasionally do a deal every once in a while. So having access to MLS is still to their advantage. And I agree with Sam and all the panelists that we've got, as MLSs, have to show more value, because it's more than just putting it in the computer. It's other valuable services that the MLS offer. And I don't think that the policy that we have, that we're putting in place, I think we're going to be tweaking it as we go along, because there's going to be someone out there who's learned to game the system. And I think as we move forward, we'll be getting members calling us, sending us emails, and the policy committee will look at it again and see what we can do best. But putting this in place is a positive foot forward to move the MLSs. And I think as the challenge to all the MLSs is showing more value to your member. And I think this is going to help everyone pick their game up.
Throw a couple questions your way, kind of taking that perspective from the field and then translating what the intent of the policy was. So kind of where we started with the question about Sam, if you can just comment about from a policy perspective, if a broker belongs to several MLSs, can the broker place a listing into the MLS even if the listing agent may belong to another? Is there anything else we should know from the way the policy is written on that one? And then I have a follow-up question for you.
So guys, this is Rodney. I just wanted to chime in. If it's okay, I want to chime in on that. I know there's been a lot of discussion about filing listings with a service and how a waived licensee may be affected with that. And when the policy was first adopted, there was one approach to it. So the MLS Technology and Emerging Issues Advisory Board discussed this at its meeting in March. And there's really some local discretion here that I want to make sure everyone understands. And that is, for any waived licensee, the MLS can establish as part of their waiver agreement or as part of their MLS rules that that waived licensee will not be able to submit listings to an MLS if they've received a waiver, that they've consciously decided they don't want to avail themselves to the benefits of that service and they don't want to pay for it. So an MLS can take that hardline approach if they choose to. What we heard after that interpretation from a lot of MLS executives was there was still value in that information, that listing, and that while they recognized the requirement to provide a waiver to the licensee, they preferred to get the listing itself because they wanted their participants to know about it and they wanted to have it in their database. So at the MLS's discretion, you can, one, preclude any waived licensee from filing a listing with the MLS, or you can, two, require that the broker, because he's a participant of the MLS, submit that listing. And as part of that, you can also indicate that the agent will not be identified. And some of our panelists talked about that the broker would then have to field those questions and whatnot. Or three, you could leave it at the discretion of the listing broker whether you would give him the ability to file that listing with the MLS or not. So there's a whole level of discretion on behalf of the MLS, and this is what you're going to want to discuss and establish locally with your implementation, which is, one, will you preclude the listing from being filed if the listing agent is a waived licensee? Two, will you require the broker to file it because he's an MLS participant? Or three, will you allow the broker to file it at his discretion? So I hope that clears that up.
This is Matt.
Could I just add? Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, you go first, Nicole.
Oh, okay, quickly. Just a couple of observations listening to everybody, which just to weigh in. First of all, I think that these are all, it's like what we call like creative, workarounds, creative marketing, whatever you want to call it. And that's always, there's going to be somebody always that's going to try to circumvent whatever policies. And that's just the reality of it. But at the end of the day, if you're a listing agent and you're going out to somebody's home and sitting in their living room with them and talking about, I want to list your property and this is why I'm the right, realtor for you, that it would be really hard to explain to them, but my name's not going to be on your listing. My broker's name is, but I'm your listing agent, because the public doesn't understand that. So the public believes their listing agent is who has their listing. So there is a definite correlation between the desire and really the public's expectation of the listing agent being listed as the listing agent on all of the third-party data aggregators, the MLS system and so forth, and on the broker's website through an IDX or VOW. And then secondly, remember that if they are affiliated with that broker, they have to be a member of some MLS. So I think that that's an important point to make, that it's just because if they have a listing and they want to be a member over here, that's their choice, but they do have to be a member of some MLS. That's still part of the requirement. Those are my 2 cents.
Well said, Nicole. I just want to go back to what Rodney said and point out the fact that one of the things I love about how NAR and the MLS community is approaching this policy and these policy shifts is leaving some things up to local control. It's very difficult to write a one-size-fits-all paragraph for 1.2, 1.3 million users across 600 and some odd MLSs. So we have to take the broad brush, we have to leave some local control to those things, and realize that we are an organized marketplace striving to serve the needs of our broker participants and subscribers, who the vast majority of them want to be a part of us. We can run down a million rabbit holes of outliers and folks trying to game the system. And I promise you, they're gaming the system today as it's written. And they're going to game the system tomorrow. Those folks who are going to do that are going to do that. We have to try to find ways to curtail that behavior. But at the end of the day, what is the best organized marketplace for the vast majority of users who want to be participating and being in it, sharing information and sharing data? That's the lens I try to look through on it. And as I do look at these changes to 7.42 and 7.43, I think they're positive because of some of the local aspects that are left.
So that's a good transition. I promised Rodney a follow-up policy related, and so kind of related to that theme of possibly gaming the system. Some questions coming in around, pulling feeds. If a brokerage firm has a company website that pulls a feed from more than one MLS, can an agent be listed on that site if they are not participants in all MLSs that have a feed on the site? So if you can talk from a policy perspective about that, maybe touch on IDX as well.
Thank you very much, Laura. So we're talking about the duties and the ethical responsibilities under Article 12 here, I think, is the underlying basis for it. And that's the standard of creating a true picture and representation to the public. So obviously, there's a lot of factors that will come into play when you're looking at that. But if we're strictly speaking to the ability of a broker to list the agents who are affiliated with his company, when his company's website includes a link to a particular MLS, there would be no prohibition against the broker listing the agents in his firm. Just like there would be no prohibition against a broker listing agents who might not be realtors on his website because they are in fact affiliated with his company. Where it crosses the line is where it creates a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding that somehow that agent is a subscriber of the MLS. And I'm sure there's some overt action that may do that. And if that takes place, then yeah, that could be seen as a possible violation of Article 12. But otherwise, just listing the agent on a website that includes an IDX feed would not be a violation of MLS rules or the Code of Ethics.
I think too, if they were speaking to, this is Nicole, if they were speaking to listing different, let's say that some of their agents are affiliated with one MLS and some are affiliated with another, and displaying all of those listings on the broker IDX feed is clearly allowed due to the commingling of listings allowed under the IDX policy. So just to take it a step further.
Okay, looking at the time, I'm going to throw out one more question, and Sam, if we can start with you, and then Betsy, you can do our wrap up. So starting with you, Sam, just the perspective, we've talked about the principal subscriber and the participants, the broker listing agent dynamic. How about taking that to the team perspective and what that, how that's being addressed, and then maybe Rodney, you can talk about that also from a policy perspective.
Well, thanks
sure,
again,
yeah,
guys.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. Go first.
No, I was actually going to throw it to you first, Rodney.
Darn, you beat me to it. Okay, so for teams, and this is a question we're getting a lot too, is, how does this whole waiver opportunity for licensees affect teams? So and I think the simplest way to look at it is there's no anticipation here that the MLS is going to provide services to somebody who has established that they do not want those services or the benefits of the MLS. So when we talk about teams, by getting a waiver, these individuals indicate that they do not want to receive or pay for the data or services by the MLS. If a waived licensee is part of a team, and if that team wants to use the MLS's waiver can preclude the team from filing team listings with the service unless all of the members of the team are subscribers. Again, if somebody decides they don't want to avail themselves to the benefits of the service, yet they're part of a team and that team wants to get the benefits of the service, the MLS can say, well, wait a minute, everybody then is going to have to pay for the benefits of the MLS to do so.
Great, thank
and I'll kick it back to Sam.
I couldn't have said it any better, so I won't try to. The only other closing thing I would add there is, I think in looking at these options for implementation, it would be great for folks to go back and talk to your brokers about how, you know, each of these options might affect them and the amount of work that's necessary, while obviously still keeping in mind protecting the value of the MLS and having a system that works for you locally. Folks like obviously Matt Consalvo from AR MLS has a lot of background again on that. Kip Cooper at Heartland MLS, and we've got folks at Carolina MLS who have worked through these kind of policies for many years and have really experience with them to tell you what you might you know, find as positive experiences and maybe things that are a lot more processed based on what they've been through. So you know, being able to reach out to those organizations would be really helpful, in addition to your broker customers, in finding which one would be the best for you to employ locally.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Rodney. And thank you to all of our panelists and our attendees today. We really appreciate you taking the time. I think there was some great discussion. I know there are some questions that we did not go to, so we'll be exporting all of the questions, and NAR staff will be reviewing them and either adding them to the FAQ or getting to those questions directly to be addressed. And then just to make a plug, up on the screen right now is the email address for the NAR Association and Governance team for any questions that might not have been answered. Also to the CMLS team, if there's anything that we can help you with in terms of resources. And then on the nar.realtor page, there are quite a few resources, so I would really encourage anyone to go take a look at those. There's a whole FAQ page that answers a lot of these questions, as well as a document on how to comply. So if you were to go to nar.realtor, you can type in 7.42 in the search bar, and it'll bring up all of the things that are about this. There's sample waivers on there, all of that kind of different stuff. So please take advantage of any of the resources. And as Sam mentioned, reach out to a neighbor or a friend and make sure to talk to other people about it. But we are all here to help and really excited for the future. So thank you all so much. This will be posted on the CMLS website under councilmls.org/webinars within the next day or so. Have a great day.